U.S. President Donald Trump has been hearing from a bipartisan group of lawmakers this afternoon on possible gun safety bills. He told them he was willing to consider new age limits, then accused them of being afraid of the NRA. Let's take a listen.
You can't buy a handgun at 18, 19, or 20. You have to wait till you're 21. But you can buy the gun, the weapon used in this horrible shooting at 18. You are going to decide. The people in this room pretty much are going to decide. But I would give very serious thought to it. I can say that the NRA is opposed to it. And I'm a fan of the NRA. I mean, there's no bigger fan. I'm a big fan of the NRA. They want to do right. These are great people. These are great patriots. They love our country. But that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. It doesn't make sense that I have to wait till I'm 21 to get a handgun, but I can get this weapon at 18. I don't know. So I was just curious as to what you did in your bill.
We didn't address it, Mr. President. Look, I think
you know why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
The National Rifle Association contributed more than $11 million to electing Trump as president. Meanwhile, a couple of Canadian banks are two of a dozen financial institutions bankrolling gun manufacturers, at least according to a new report. U.S. Securities and Exchange filings show the Bank of Montreal and TD have finance agreements with gun makers. Megan Roberts has been looking into this for us. Megan, what can you tell us about all this?
Well, as in the preamble to all of this, we've been seeing so much financial pressure to stop some of these companies with connections to gun manufacturers, to the NRA, and we've been seeing a lot of digging as well, people trying to find new connections between corporations and different, either the NRA or gun manufacturers. And now we're seeing that there are two Canadian banks that are providing financing to gun manufacturers, TD and the Bank of Montreal. So we've learned that the Bank of Montreal provided a line of credit to Vista Outdoor. That is the company that made the rifle used by the Sandy Hook elementary shooter. And we also learned that TD Bank provided a line of credit to Sig Sauer and a revolving $78 million line of credit to Smith & Wesson. So two Canadian banks and three different gun manufacturers. Now, this is all according to a report by Think Progress. What they did was compile a number of Canadian and American banks that have been giving finances to gun companies, specifically companies that produce those assault-style rifles. And they also provided in their report the original source, where they were getting all of this information. So we were able to go back and see the credit agreements between some of these Canadian banks and these gun companies on the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission website, as well as there was a link to a 2016 letter from the New York City Public Advocate to TD, urging them to stop their dealings with gun companies in the wake of the Pulse nightclub shooting in Florida. So a really interesting development in all of the economics of this particular story. Indeed.
Now, how are all the banks responding to this?
Well, we did reach out to both. We heard back from TD. They said that they were, of course, devastated by what happened in Florida, by the violence. They condemn it. Let's bring up more of what TD said in response to our questions. They said, "We believe that gun control is an urgent issue that must be addressed in the public policy arena. We strongly support bipartisan efforts aimed at preventing these types of tragedies from happening again. As a matter of policy, we cannot comment on the nature and specifics of our relationships with customers." So not providing any specific details about these agreements. We also, of course, reached out to the Bank of Montreal, and we have not yet heard back from them.
All right. Megan, thanks for this.
You're welcome.
All right, to take us through the ethical minefield of controversy surrounding the gun industry, we're joined by Chris McDonald. He's associate professor at Ryerson University and director of the Ted Rogers Leadership Center. It's nice to see you back on the show. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
You know, I look at the preponderance of stuff we just talked about, whether it's the kids leading the charge on this or the pressure on businesses that are affiliated with the NRA or Dick's Sporting Goods saying, no, that's it, we're done. It feels like this is different this time. Is it?
Yeah, it does feel different. I mean, unfortunately, we say that a lot. We've said that sort of thing before.
Well, usually, this last bunch we said it's going to be the exact same.
After Sandy Hook, Dick's stopped selling assault rifles for a while and then slowly eased back into it. So it's a bit too soon to say that it's different this time, but it feels a bit different.
How much pressure is being put on these retailers? Because it was interesting to see them all just sort of go. First, Omaha National Bank went right up to, the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods today.
Yeah, I think the speed we're seeing is, I'm not sure that I'm not sure it's plausible that it's that much real pressure, financial, economic pressure.
Right.
it's just too soon for anyone to have felt that. I think what they're feeling is that it does feel different this time, and that this groundswell led by these amazing kids really does mean that they've got some choices to make in terms of who they affiliate with.
And who they want to be. You know, you look at the Dix example, and he's made a very clear decision that we don't want to be affiliated with this. Right. We want to at least appear to be on the right side of this debate. And yet, they are clearly leaving some money on the table.
Sure.
Are other retailers going to feel the pressure to follow suit? Or will other retailers look at this and say, well, I'll do that business for sure?
There will absolutely be some of both, right? There's going to be someone who's going to pick up that extra. There's always a business opportunity there. But I think, yeah, other retailers will say, look, this is our chance to sort of define ourselves. We're going to do it very carefully because we know the American public is divided on gun control, but we're going to find ways to try and split the difference.
And you've talked about, or wrote about, how this is really difficult on the NRA. Not just the debate, but the way this debate is unfolding. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think what they're calling the boycott the NRA, the hashtag movement, is an interesting one because it's not really a boycott of the NRA. No one's asking people to stop being members of the NRA, though lots of people would love that. It's pressure on any organization, any business that offers sort of an affiliate deal to members of the NRA, right, to pull out. And a couple dozen of them have already said, and big companies, big brands have pulled out. And I think, most boycotts are aimed at doing some financial damage. And part of the problem is they often hit the least powerful at the organization first. They're often badly targeted. But in this case, there's very little chance of real economic impact. I think it's just an attempt to take some of the shine off the NRA and try and drive a wedge between them and some of the politicians that support them.
And that's just it. And that, to me, is the thing that these students in Florida have been able to grab onto and are clearly not letting go of and are pushing. And because we're already starting to see some of those, like I've seen Republican sort of lifelong NRA members back away on some of their stances. We see the President of the United States saying, yeah, we should have limits on who can buy assault-style rifles. It seems to be working.
Right. A decade ago, George Bush Sr. tore up his NRA card because of his I think exercising some common sense, right?
But then, then you got to Bill Clinton introducing the assault weapons ban, and I think not a single Republican lost, an incumbent Republican lost in either the Congress or the Senate. They paid a dear political price for that, that we are still looking at. That's why so many of these politicians are so afraid now. If we approach it the way that you've sort of described it here, and from a slightly different perspective, and you see the way that this seems to be getting more traction going down that road, does it inevitably get to the politicians and say, listen, you guys?
I think it's an interesting thing that they're approaching this through the market, right? So this is the intersection of politics and the marketplace. And on the one hand, you get these charismatic kids making speeches on TV. On the other hand, you've got economic pressure, and it may just be the perfect storm that has the effect they're looking for.
And yet, we don't talk about this enough. The NRA is a reflection of the industry. The industry makes $13.5 billion. It has an economic impact of $40 or $50 billion. It employs almost 300,000 people. The power of the economics is so clearly on the one side. Is it possible to have a proper and informed debate when the economics of it are so out of whack?
Yeah, it's hard, and the American system gives more opportunity for lobby groups to have a say than the Canadian system has its problems, but they're not those problems. And so, yeah, in most other countries, something like the NRA would be a weird little fringe group, a one-issue group that wouldn't have much impact. But the United States is the United States.
We're going to have to follow this, and we'll probably follow it up again with you. It's great to see you again. Thanks for doing this. Chris McDonald, Associate Professor at Ryerson University and Director of the Ted Rogers Leadership Center.